It's so wonderful to be here. You're going to hear a lot of amazing things this afternoon, and I want you to know when you hear some of them that you don't believe or don't want to hear, that I wouldn't be sharing them if I didn't know there was an answer. And especially, I want you to know that you're the answer. Each one of us. We can make all the difference in the world, individually and together. The numbers in this room demonstrate it. So I'm going to begin with an example. And it may seem a little unusual for you. It's an apple. This apple represents the planet Earth. Now I need to find my other prop. So this is the Earth, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut away 3/4 of this apple, and I'm going to discard it, I hope. Problem is these organic apples hold together much better. So that's the Earth's oceans. And I need you to know that there are 15 fisheries in the world's oceans, and 5 of them are virtually non-productive, and the other 10 will be non-productive very soon. In the Antarctic Ocean, the phytoplankton that help produce oxygen for us are decreasing at a rapid rate for many different reasons. The Amazon rainforest, compared with 40 years ago, about 2/3 of it's been cut down, and it used to produce up to 20% of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. So not only are we having a carbon dioxide buildup, we're having a decrease in available oxygen. But what's really important here is this remaining quarter of the Earth. It's the Earth that you work in, that you are, and that we come from. Now, in order to bring things sort of up to date in NASA real-time data, we need to cut away 2/3 of the remaining part of the Earth and discard it, because that's the Earth's desertified area and/or it's under ice. So really, we are only living on about 1/12 of the Earth in terms of food, but are we? Actually, we have to cut away now 2/3 of the skin of this remaining 1/12 of the planet and discard it. And so really, the food that we eat is obtained from 4% of the planet Earth. Now, if it were all in this 1/4 or 4% of the area, we'd be a lot better off. The yields would be higher, the erosion rate would be slower, and the insect and disease problems would not be as great. But it's actually spread over that whole 25% of the Earth's land surface. And you may be wondering, well, what's going to happen? I hope you're wondering. By the end of this afternoon, you won't be wondering. The Scientific American, December 15th, 2014, said that there's only 60 years worth of farmable soil left in the world. I say that it may be actually as low as 29 years. I'm 72 years old, almost 73, and that's about 1/3 of my lifetime. It's a blink of your eye. As you get older, you realize. But if you're wondering what's going to happen to this, it's something you can show everybody at dinner. In the next 29 years, it's going to disappear like this. It's going to taste good too. And it doesn't matter what kind of diet you have a whole lot, because even if all the United States were eating a vegan diet, and you can make a case for that, but even if it were, we would only have 30.5 years of farmable soil left in the world. So what can we do about that? A lot. So we'll begin our presentation now. If you want to predict the future, create it. I want you to realize that we're each creators. We don't have to wait to see what's going to happen. We can shape it. We're artists. We're creative. Oh, talking about proactive, I have control of this in my pocket. Oh, well. Where do I point it? That's the question. So one of the ways that we're going to do this is by insourcing our solution. We're outsourcing everything, our food, our energy, but actually politicians, business people, agribusiness, academicians are not going to be able to take care and help create in a major way our future for us. Each one of us is going to have to do most of that. Those other people will certainly assist, but we really need to realize it's tag, we're it. Now this is what happened to me, is I had a question back in the early 1970s. I wanted to know what's the smallest area that you can grow all your food, clothing, and money in an environmentally sound way, in an equitable way, so if everyone does it, everyone could live well. So I went to the San Joaquin Valley, the Central Valley in California, which was providing 30% of all the food for the United States at the time. And I asked this question of agronomists and of farmers, and they said, well, we don't know, but if you grow 1,000 acres of wheat and it's a good year, you'll be able to pay your bills. So I learned 3 things from this. I learned that farming wasn't working economically, and for the average farmer today, it isn't either. They're only earning about 25% of their income on the farm, the average farmer. I learned that they didn't know the answer. And the third thing that I learned was tag, I was it. If I wanted to know the answer to the question, I had to find it. I decided to work together with a team as we all need to do. And a team stronger. Not only do we have more diversity and more talents and more skill, but we catch each other when we make mistakes. So, farming for the future now. I want you to know the challenge, and believe me, we've got a challenge. I want you to know the hope, and my heavens, we've got a lot to hope about. I want you to feel relieved and empowered when you know that there really are things that each of us can do that are going to make such a tremendous difference. And I want you to know that all we have to do is act just where we are. So Voltaire had Candide say, in the end of that story, the whole world's a garden, and what a wonderful place it would be if each one of us just took care of our part of the earth, our garden. All we need to do is break these gigantic challenges, which we're going to look briefly at, into bite-sized pieces, and we can be productive. What it's all about is creating a new and better world. We need to know the joy of the process. It's going to be fun. Farming is fun. Farming right now is difficult. It's one of the most challenging and dangerous jobs that you can do in the world, but we can actually, through risk management, which biologically intensive practices can make easy, we can reduce that and make it fun. The earth needs our help now. Soil. Living soil is the most important resource in the world, and that's what you as organic, sustainable, and regenerative farmers are creating. So you may not know it, but actually a tablespoonful of soil, living soil, can have up to 6 billion microbial life forms in it. That's almost as many life forms in that small amount of soil as there are people on the planet. May the force be with you. Now look at the root system that you can create. Did you know that the carrot root goes down 8 feet deep? If you only prepare the soil 6 inches deep like most agricultural systems do, what kind of head start do you think you're giving the carrot? With biologically intensive food raising, you prepare the soil in a way to where you create good soil structure, 24 inches deep. It's a much better start. Now here's what's been happening. If you look closely at this, you'll find that the United States amount of farmable soil per capita has gone down at a rate almost as great of the decrease in farmable soil in India during the period from 1975 to 2005. We don't see it. CNN isn't reporting about it, but I assure you it's happening. Okay, every time we eat a pound of food in the United States, it's been grown with standard mechanized chemical practices. We lose 6 pounds of farmable soil due to wind and water erosion because of the agricultural practices being used. Since each one of us eats a ton of food a year, 2,000 pounds, we are causing 6 tons of farmable soil to be lost annually in the United States. The fortunate thing is we're only 4.5% of the world's people, but in developing countries where 90% of the world's people live, it's 12 pounds and 12 tons. In China, it's 18, and in California, where I live, it's 24 tons or 24 pounds per pound of food eaten. Incredible. It's so fast that you can actually, see an inch being lost over a 7-year period in California. It doesn't need to be this way. So you can make a really good case for the fact that within 49 years, the whole planet will be a desert. And something we need to take responsibility for as organic farmers is, did you know that every time you eat a pound of food that's been grown organically, that 3 to 5 1/4 and as much as 8 pounds of farmable soil are lost? This is a responsibility. Organic farming is wonderful, and I'm going to step back and try not to walk into microphones here, but organic farming is a major step in the right direction. But we need to keep walking. We need to get it to the point where we're not depleting the soil. Now you may say, I have a wonderful farm. Look, that's not a depleted soil, and that would be true. But the reason why is because we're importing 50 to 84% of our compost materials and our nutrients in organic fertilizer form. What's one of the worst things that could happen in the whole world today, as well as one of the best, and I mean as well as one of the best? It would be if the whole world switched to organic farming and gardening. Why? Only 1.5% of U.S. farmland is organic. In the world, you could make a case that maybe 1% of all the world farmland is organic. If everybody switched to organic, Where are you going to get your fertilizers in organic fertilizer form, or your nutrients? Where are you going to get your organic matter if everybody's importing 50 to 84% of it? So when I began this work in 1972, I wasn't asking the question in that concrete form, as I now understand what's involved, but I could feel it. And I wanted to know that on a closed system basis, as much as we can get, that we could actually have a thriving, living, sustainable farming system. And my heart wanted that. And when I saw Alan Chadwick and his biodynamic French intensive method at the University of Santa Cruz, which was incredible, I knew I wanted that. Anybody would want it. It was so fertile and so lush. And we can create that. But in order to do this, we're going to have one limit. Dr. E.F. Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful, called them self-denying limitations. I call them self-enhancing guidelines. What we need to do is we need to only market, and you're not going to like this, but we need to market only 10% of our cultivated land. Why? Because we're taking away the minerals. Did you know that most of the world's soils are demineralized? Do you know that most of the world's soils are dehumidified? When I began this work in 1972, the world's soils generally were 2% SOM, or soil organic matter. Now they're 1.2%. Wow. It's really hard to hold the minerals in the soil if you don't have enough soil organic matter. So we have to change that, and we can change that. And our research and our work have shown that you can build up your soil organic matter in a reasonable amount of time. There are now 2 experiences that we've had, one in Northern California on the coast, in a cool, humid area, and another in Aguascalientes, Mexico, which is a tropical, hot, dry area. And in both places, it's been possible to build up the soil organic matter twice as fast as normally. We also now know that there are 5 different ways. I gave a talk about it this morning. You can get the disc and learn more if you weren't here. But there are 5 different ways that you can relate to the growing of compost crops and making of compost that can give you 2 to 10 times more compost power. So I've been telling you so far the good news, but there's something else happening in the world that you're going to need to know about, because though it's not going to affect you here in Minnesota as far as, and Wisconsin as far as we know, because you've got so much water, most of the world is becoming desertified, and the UN FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, has said that by 2025, about 10 years from now, that 75% of the world population is going to be at risk because there's not enough water to grow any food or not enough food for those people. It doesn't have to be this way. Grow Biointensive uses 67% less water per pound of grain produced and 84% less water per pound, actually 86% less water per pound of vegetable and soft fruit produced. Also, if you combine this with being able to grow compost that's more effective and more powerful, and that there's more total compost as well. Compost normally holds 6 times its weight in water, but if you have it so you're using compost in a way where you have 5 times the compost power, that's going to be as if it's going to enable us to hold 30 times the weight of water in the soil. It's also going to help us hold the minerals. And it's going to be really important to build up the minerals in your soil. And everybody needs to build up the minerals in their soil and keep it there. We're at peak farmable soil and we're at peak water. And the peak energy is in us. It's not in a barrel of oil. Wow. Can you imagine that? Is this danger or is it opportunity? I think it's opportunity because there's so many wonderful things that we can do about it. We're able to grow more food in less area with just a fraction of the resources and actually grow soil at the same time. One of the kinds of t-shirts we should create is grow soil. And maybe on the back it says change scarcity into abundance. Now, why do we grow food? Why do we farm? I guess that's the main question. Why do we farm? I think there are three things. We farm to eat, we farm to grow money, and we farm probably for a lifestyle. But the main thing is we can do all of those things for a family of 4.5 acres. We don't need 5,000 acres. We don't need 1,000 acres. We don't need even 500 acres. Most of the people in the world are only going to have, if they set aside enough land to preserve the environment, most people are only going to have 4,500 square feet, a tenth of an acre to grow all their food, their money, and their compost on. You can do it. Ecology Action knows how. Some of our farmers are here, and they can share with you how. Now, normally to grow your 6 inches of soil that you need, it takes 3,000 years. It takes 500 years per inch, both in the United States as a whole and in the world. An increased understanding of our composting processes can enable us on our farms to be 2 to 10 times more compost effective per unit of area and time. In doing this, we can accelerate the soil building process. And not only can we build up our soils to increased health on a comparatively co-system, sustainable way, we can begin to reclaim soil that's been depleted. Now, yeah, I love this photo. Thank you, Ann Geddes. How many people do you think are born every day? You can see it right here. That's births minus deaths, 216,000 people. It's enough to repopulate La Crosse 4 times a day. How would you like to experience that? I would like to see it. And in Minneapolis, every 2 days, or Tokyo, the largest city in the world, 2 times a year. This is all happening. It's sort of like we're like that motel that has the light on all the time and everybody's coming on down for a visit. But this means that every day we need 34,000 more new farmable acres of soil. Grow soil, create soil. That's what it's all about, and it's what you're about. It's what your lives are about. Per year, we need 22,000 square miles of new farmable soil. That's the size of the whole California Central Valley every year. It's not happening. What to do? We need to stop outsourcing our fertility. We need to grow our own organic matter, not import it. We need to recycle our nutrients. We need to grow a living soil. And we need to make it as closed system as possible. We can't do it completely because like the sun's up there, and if we bring the sun into our farm, there's going to be awkward circumstances. So it's not going to be totally closed system, and we're going to be marketing some of our food, thank heavens, because we need some income, but we need to figure out how not to do too much exporting of our nutrients. What we need is organic plus farming. We need to go beyond organics in one way, but really it's organic and it's plus. And that's the solution. So we talked about this already. So organic farming really leads to the loss of currently to 3 to 5 and as much as 8 pounds of farmable soil for a pound of food eaten, because we're mining it from other soils, the organic matter and the nutrients. We don't have to. What kind of future do you want? I know I'd like the one that's down below on the bottom half of this photograph. We can have a sustainable, equitable, and very profitable, easy way to grow food in a really good production system. Now, you're going to see in just a little bit some of the economics, and you're going to be surprised by what you can earn. But first, let's have a little agricultural history. 10,000 years ago in northern Iran, the people there were able to grow all their food in the form of calories in 3.7 minutes a day. I can tell you how in 5 minutes. I've been teaching this general concept for 20 years, and only one family has asked me how. It leads me to believe that people don't want to grow all of their own food. What they actually did is they grew all their calories by working 20, let's see, I want to make sure I get this right. Sometimes I speed forward. 20 minutes a day for 60 days. So it wasn't true that it was 3.7, but on the average it was. Then we have the Mayan culture. The Mayan culture, 1,000 years ago, what they did is they grew all their food with biological intensivity on a neighborhood basis. And they survived when other civilizations around them were crashing. I think the reason that the Mayan civilization eventually faded was that they didn't use biologically intensive practices sustainably, because it's so productive that you can actually deplete the soil 2 to 6 times faster if you don't use it properly. Now, China, up to the 1950s, grew complete diets on 3,600 square feet. That's less than 1/10 of an acre. It's not a question of whether or not it's possible to do it. Yeah, we have to learn how to do it, and that's what Ecology Action has been putting together for the last 44 years, and you don't have to take that time. You can just get the relevant publications or videos, and you can learn at your own pace, but you will have an advantage of everything that we've learned. Now, the Hanunus are from 6,000 years ago, a Stone Age culture. They still exist in the Philippines, and they're still really effective. They haven't been impacted by civilization very much. They're illiterate. They don't have computers. They don't read. They have a 200-crop, 5-year rotation system that grows 40 different varieties of rice every year. So no matter whether it's too hot, too cold, too wet, or too dry, they get enough calories. They're farming literate. You might find them boring. They spend 80% of their table conversation at their 3 meals talking about farming. Good God. And their children, if they lived in Minneapolis, in the inner city, they probably need the Secret Service to guard them, because they play farmer. Can you imagine what the other kids might think about Minneapolis? Maybe they could get away with it. Well, biologically intensive farming. Ecology Action for the last 44 years has been enabling people to feed themselves, one garden and one farm at a time. We had a man from a Latin American country a few years back, and he said in 1 month in our 6-month intern program, he'd learned more than he learned in 6 years in the university. I just about 5 days ago got an email from a different man who's now in charge of the whole agricultural education program for his entire country, who was a 6-month intern, and he said he learned more in 6 months with us than he learned at the university in 4 years. Now, both of these men, they know more than I do. I can tell you that for sure. But what they learned is they learned the system, the biologically intensive system, so they know where to hang the pieces. And this is what makes people so much more effective. As Sylvia said, it's being used in 151 countries successfully in virtually all climates and soils where food is grown. You know, it works, and we want to share it. We don't want to sell you on it. We want you to try it. If you like it, we hope you'll do it. But if you don't, please do something else, because you can certainly see from the world challenges that we all need to get involved. This is at our first garden in the Stanford University Industrial Park. We had no topsoil, no subsoil. All we had was sea horizon material that normally would take oh my gosh, I just can't believe it every time I think about it. It normally would take 500 years for 1 inch of this material to become soil. We were able to make it into farmable soil in 8.5 years. This is according to a master's thesis study at the University of California, Berkeley. This is Marion Cartwright. She's a Midwesterner. She's from the Chicago area. And why not grow food everywhere? You know, when you're growing rows, in between you're growing deserts. And you put organic matter everywhere, and it oxidizes out faster from the desert area. You put minerals everywhere, and they get lost easily too. And then what you do is you have the benefit of Christmas all year, because the weeds are in between and you get the ho, ho, ho all the time. You can grow grains. Did you know that in 300 square feet you can grow enough grain at intermediate grow biointensive yields for 1 1-pound loaf of bread for every week in the year? Wow. Let's do it. This is our site in Palo Alto, California. It's on the side of a mountain. It has a 30% slope in a lot of it, and it's home. A lot of people say, well, I'm not going to do grow biointensive or biologically intensive gardening or farming because it's manual. It's too much work. It's really skill intensive, so let me describe to you how it's skill intensive, and then you'll see the economics of it, and maybe a little bit of you will start being interested. What we have here is 100 square foot area depicted and the number of lettuce plants that might be growing in that area. In rows, it would take 4 times the area to get the same number of lettuce plants. You'd need 4 times the water per unit of area. You'd need to weed 4 times the area. You'd need to compost 4 times the area. You'd need to fertilize 4 times the area. Since the soil is prepared in a way that's beginning to create good soil structure 24 inches deep, when you weed, you get the whole root and it doesn't regrow. If you really know how to double dig the Aikido way that uses almost no energy and you end up feeling better at the end of the dig than you did at the beginning, then you don't have to believe me. But it's true. Then what happens is the single digging of 2 of those 100 square foot areas will take the same amount of energy as the double digging. So it's really skill intensive. It's not labor intensive. This method builds up the soil faster than in nature. Up to 6 inches of farmable soil in as little as 50 years. Normally it takes 3,000 years. So this is like flying on the Concorde jet in terms of soil creation. So you want to do it the slow way, or you want to do it the effective way. In California, to build up 6 inches of farmable soil because of the climate and because of the parent material and the serpentine soil, it takes 12,000 years to build up 6 inches of farmable soil in nature. Now, we use 67 to 88% less water, 50 to 100% less purchased fertilizer or nutrient in organic fertilizer form, and 94 to 99% less energy per pound of food produced. One of the things that my friend Steve Moore, who's an agroecology professor at Elon University in North Carolina, figured out, he's been farming for 45 years. He's farmed with horses, he's farmed with tractors, he's farmed with Grow Biointensive, and he found that he was up to 120 acres with horses before Grow Biointensive, and after he got into Grow Biointensive, his farm became 3 acres in size. So he did the energy study, and he realized that if you're a farm family and you have children, you want the children to do the watering, because the children use 1/3 the calories, and you'll be more energy efficient. So this is all compared with food produced with standard farming practices. What biologically intensive food raising, food growing does, it enables you to simplify your risk management by working with the life forces. It gives you control over more vegetables and more grains more easily. Now, with Grow Biointensive, it's possible to grow complete diets in 4,000 square feet or less. We could show you how to do it in 2,000 square feet pretty easily. You won't be eating what you're eating now, but remember, most of the people in the world are only going to have about 4,500 square feet to grow their food on. It's going to interest them to know that they can get all their nutrition in this small an area. Unless you think that, well, this is just those poor countries. Did you know that Japan, after Fukushima, only has 1,550 square feet per person of farmable land? They're having to import, the diet they eat takes about 70,000 square feet to be grown on, and very soon they're not going to be able to import food because of what's happening globally. So it's not just going to be the developed countries that are going to be challenged, we're all going to be challenged. Assuming intermediate Grow Biointensive yields, 1 full-size apple tree will give you 1 pound of apples for 3 1/4 people for every day in the year. And if you're like Luther Burbank and you do grafting, you can have 10 different varieties on the tree. Different colors, different sharp or sweetnesses, different crunches. It's fun. Now, what about more income per unit of area? I think that's something that you're going to be interested in. In the late 1980s, I went to the EcoFarm conference, and I told people all of the kinds of income that they could get with different crops. And there was one wonderful woman, I didn't know her at the time, in the audience, and every time I gave an example, she said under her breath, "Bullshit." She was from Vancouver, Canada, the stomping ground of Matt Anderson down here. And she went back, and it gnawed at her for about 3 years, and so she put in 20 100 square foot beds, and she started bringing in regularly $20,000 a year income net. She sold it to the restaurants in Vancouver. But this is Michael Norton at Konakai Farm, and this amazing man, what he did is he rented a ½ acre in Berkeley, California. But he only farmed, if you read the article, it says he did all this on a ½ acre, but I visited it, and he did this on half of that ½ acre. He did it on 1/4 of an acre. He eventually brought in $235,000 gross with a $50,000 net income on 1/4 of an acre. He paid his farmers 2.5 times what farmers in California were getting at the time, and he still made $50,000. Now, let's multiply that up to an acre. What do you get? I get $200,000 an acre. At the time, for high-end vegetables in California, at most, they were netting $2,000. He was getting 100 times more income. So you want to work harder? Most farmers work 60 to 80 hours a week. Or do you want to work smarter? You have to choose your crops carefully. But Michael, he would tell you all his secrets, so I want to tell you one of his secrets. And I don't know, are any of you growing salad mix? Maybe you're not here. It doesn't look like it. Not many. Anyway, he grew salad mix, and here's what he did at his second farm in Berkeley, California. He had 18-inch wide beds, and he had railway ties on both sides of the bed. And then he got an 18-inch wide hand mower, and he got a plastic reel from England, you know, that cuts. Because if you cut lettuce with metal, it goes brown or black. But if you cut it with plastic, it doesn't oxidize that way. So he had beds that were 1.5 feet wide and about 300 feet long. And this is how long it took him to harvest his mescaline mix. Okay, that's just the beginning. Because one of the ways he made his money and why he was so popular with his customers is he sold this salad mix to restaurants, and restaurants have a 2% profit margin. And a lot of them go under within the first 2 years. They have to make sure they give big enough portions to their customers to keep the customers, but they have to also keep them small enough so they don't go bankrupt by using too much portion. So what Michael did is he got some extruded plastic. The plastic trays were about this long and about this wide, and there were divots. And he took this mowed salad mix and he sprinkled it on the divots. And then he shook it to even it out, and the rest fell down in a safe place. And then he had a plastic top that he snapped onto it, and then he put it in a cool room until he took it to market. Well, what had been happening in the gourmet restaurants in the greater San Francisco Bay Area is, you know, the cooking assistants had their latex gloves on, and they would weigh the salad mix onto a scale, and when it reached a certain point, they'd take it off and put it on a plate. And this took a lot of time and labor was money for the restaurateurs. So when Michael came along, they popped the top off of this tray, and this is how long it took to measure out the salad for each plate. There were other things he did, but there are always, for all of us, better ways of doing things. Now, one of the potentials in the future, there isn't time today to develop this for you, but it's going to be possible to have 2-acre mini farm CSAs that grow 20 balanced diets for 21 each for 20 people, and which bring in a net of $70,000 a year. So, I mean, you can't just walk out tomorrow. It's not like buying a black box and plugging it in and it all works. You're going to have to evolve up to it. But it's going to be one of the major games in town in the future. Also, one of my favorite ideas is to have cooperative, small farming, agricultural land trust farming communities, which might look like this. Oh, it looks like we don't have it in this one, so I'll describe it. What you do is we have 120 acres, and half of it we leave in wild, because the farmer of the future, to be a good farmer, is going to have to leave half of his or her farmland in wild to preserve plant and animal genetic diversity. Otherwise, we're going to lose the environment. We lose the environment, we're not going to have a place that we really can live in or want to live in. So the other 60 acres is going to have 100 half-acre mini farms. And each one of those half acres is going to be able to grow complete diets for 3 to 4 family members plus a $70,000 a year income. And we're going to put those homes into 3 different communities, 2 33 family communities and 1 34 family communities. And why? Because you have the most diversity and the healthiest dynamics when you have 24 to 40 families working together. They know about this because of co-housing experiences. How do we do this? Through deep soil structure creation over time, the use of compost, which holds water, nutrients, and one of the most important things about compost is you want compost material diversity. You want to put as many different kind of materials in your compost pile as possible because there's thousands of soil microbes and they like different foods. So if you want to enhance and have the most kind of microbes in your soil, you want to have a compost pile, even if it's just a handful of yarrow flowers or whatever it is, because then you're going to have more different kinds of microbes in your growing soil, and if you do, it becomes a pharmacia. And the reason it becomes a pharmacia is because a lot of those microbes produce antibiotics. And it's known, generally, that if you have a healthy plant, the amino acid mix in the tissues is such to where the harmful insects don't like it. But it's also known that if you have a sick plant, the amino acid mix changes and it becomes an attractant for the harmful insects. So you can actually reduce your pest challenges by just having a diverse materials going into your compost pile, ending up with more diversity of microbes in your soil and having more healthy plants. We use close plant spacing in the seedling flats and also in the beds so that when the plants are mature, their leaves touch or barely touch. And this is one of the key things for using less water. You're going to use about half the water when you use the close spacing per pound of food produced. Companion planting, putting crops together that encourage each other. I'm sure you know about these plant synergies. I taught this many years ago in Palo Alto, and then 8 years later, I was teaching companion planting again, and at the end of the class, one of the students, a man who was a farmer in Half Moon Bay, she said, "You know, John, I took this class 8 years earlier, and you said that green beans and strawberries do better when they're grown in blocks next to each other, not interplanted." And he said, "Everybody over in Half Moon Bay thinks I'm crazy, but every time I go to the bank each week, I laugh." We grow 60% of our growing area in compost crops. This is your winter and your summer grains for the most part. They produce a significant amount of calories and a tremendous amount of biomass for compost. We grow 30% of our area in special root crops. These are potatoes, sweet potatoes, garlic, parsnips, Jerusalem artichoke. Let's see, what am I missing? I'm missing 2. Not onions. Onions almost make it in, but not quite. Salsify, and I'm missing one other. So at any rate, the thing that these do, did you know that all calories are not equal? This is sort of like not exactly an accurate phrase, but if you grow wheat, wheat only produces 1/19 the calories per month per unit of area that potatoes produce. So all of these special root crops produce a tremendous amount of calories per unit of area per unit of time. Why is that going to be important? Because people are going to need to grow all their food in the smallest area. They're not going to have much farmable land. So this combination of the compost and calorie crops having 60% and 30% in special root crops, and the remaining 10% is in vegetables for missing vitamins and minerals that are not in the other crops you're growing. You can actually design these diets from your heart, and they'll take half the area to grow because your heart is smarter than your mind. Now, let's look at this. If these were 40 beds, 40,000 square feet, meaning 40 100 square foot beds giving you 4,000 square feet. You'd have 24 beds and 60% crops, 12 beds and 30% crops, and 4 beds in vegetable crops. So I want to focus on that, and here's why. In just 2 of those beds, you can grow the missing vitamins and minerals, probably, that you don't have in the other crops. In the other 2 beds, you can grow $100,000 a year legally. We use easily available seeds. Read open pollinated. And last but not least, it's a whole system. You can't dig the soil 6 inches deep and cram everybody together and not use compost and have it work. It's not going to work. 44 years, 151 countries, millions of people educated, millions of garden beds created, billions of pounds of fertile soil created or grown. And we're just getting started. How about you? This is our book, How to Grow More Vegetables. It's in 8 languages, including Braille. And these are some of our websites, growbiointensive.org. And on growbiointensive.org right now, we have our first 11 webinar training videos. In January, for 2 weeks of 2014, we brought in the 12 best Grow Biointensive teachers from around the world, and Matt and Paul and 3 of their associates videoed them. Eventually, we're going to have 40 to 50 topics online. Right now, there's 11. The first 5 are free. Try it. If you like it, there's 6 more. They're $1.99 each. You can get all of the remaining 6 videos for something like $11.99. It's sort of like buying a song online, only it's going to be an education. Also, on Ecology Action TV, you'll find the webinars. BountifulGardens.org is our mail order service. Common Ground Garden in Palo Alto is our urban mini farm. And johnjeavons.info is my site, and what I want to call your attention to is the World of Hope. That's a section, and you read 1 vignette a day, and then you let it dissolve and absorb, and then you watch another one. Okay, energy. There's a different kind of peak energy. It's our will. Really, if we want to make a difference, we're going to have to use our will and create the difference that we intend. One of the most important things in the future, and one of my favorite quotes, is feed your dreams and your fears will starve. There's been research done that shows in the human brain that when you think you have scarcity, your brain shuts down, comparatively speaking, and maybe you're only 20% as creative. But if you feel abundance and expansive, you create solutions that you can't even believe yourself. And you'll have realistic new solutions. And there are realistic solutions, and here are a bunch of people at one of our 3-day workshops in Willits that are the solutions. We need to utilize a special kind of our will. It's our skillful will. The skillful will is the ability to make and fulfill our choices with the greatest efficiency and the least effort. I truly can say to you that growing with biological intensivity is less work per unit of income, per unit of compost produced, and per unit of diet. Initially, you won't believe that, you won't experience that, but I'm working right now on a system that's 850 square feet. It can produce all your food, all your compost, and all your money for one person for all year. I'm particularly excited about using it in Mexico, where already 50% of the people are on starvation track because they're spending 70% of their income and only getting 1/3 of their calories. I'm hoping that we'll be able to catalyze them being able to grow their own food. We need a transformational paradigm that changes that cracked earth into a veritable Garden of Eden. And I just love this photograph. I mean, what's the original green? It's not no VOC paint. I mean, that's like you're in the Titanic and you go and you paint the ballroom in no VOC paint. And a few hours later, bloop, 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 bloop. The original green were plants. It's photosynthesis. Let's get real. The thing is, we keep trying to divorce ourselves from the soil. So if you want to read a really fantastic story, a short story that Leo Tolstoy wrote, it's how much it's how much land does a man need? It has a trick ending. So what we need to do again is to transform scarcity into abundance. Biologically intensive agriculture does this with water. The world doesn't have enough water, but could end up with functionally 3 times as much water with just the water that we have now. It does it in the case of nutrients, what I haven't described to you, but essentially you'll probably be using, worst case, 1/2 to 1/5 of the purchased nutrient per pound of food produced. It's not time to describe to you why, but it's transforming peak nutrient scarcity into abundance by using the nutrients more effectively. Actually, in conventional agriculture, something like 84% of the nutrients leach out. In biologically intensive agriculture, you use all the nutrients. So we can transform peak water, peak farming, peak energy, and peak farmable soil into more than enough. I want more than enough, and I hope you do. So it's not all that challenging. And this is the Candide quote. All we have to do is take care of our garden. Gandhi said to forget how to dig the soil and think about this is to forget ourselves. Small is bountiful, and there truly are economies of small scale. When you work with it, you'll see it more and more. And just like Steve Moore, who was doing 120 acres, he got down to 3 acres, and it provided the money and the food that his family needed. We all need to become more farming literate. Now, Abraham Lincoln said something in 1857. I don't know where the man found time to reflect on this, but he said, before long, the most valuable of all arts will be that of deriving a comfortable subsistence from the smallest area of land. It goes on to say, if you have this skill, that no banker, no real estate agent, no politician will be able to take away your freedom from you. It was Abraham Lincoln, 1857. Wow, what a guy. This is the kind of delicate relationship that we want to have with our environment, like this bee has with these beautiful apple blossoms. Thank you very much. Thank you. Coffee, sorry, it's wet.
It's all right.
A little bit.